Alright, hi everyone. This video could be a bit longer than some of the others that I do. I've been trying to scale my time down in videos because I know obviously an hour-long video, whatever, can be a bit of a chore to get through. But this is just going to be the final word on all of this Reddit ban bullshit, and then frankly I'm done with it. So hopefully if you're interested, based on Twitter and messages, some of you are, we'll just get this out there, we'll just get this done, and then I'm not going to talk about it again. It's frankly a waste of time and energy. So right off the bat, let's just start by saying, this ban as it currently stands, I just couldn't give a shit about it anymore. I've tried to sort of push back against it. I've tried to make people realise that when you get to a stage where your content is being selectively kept away from a content aggregator based on how you conduct yourself on Twitter or things you say in YouTube videos, something's wrong. There's something wrong with that. But I'm not bothered about a ban from a LoL, so I'm not bothered at this point about a ban from the whole of Reddit. My viewpoint is that Reddit is rapidly becoming just a shithole filled to the brim with anonymous, agenda-driven, power-hungry moderators that abuse the site's power for their own ends. I don't think the site will be here in its current format in 3 to 5 years. I'm pretty confident I will. On top of that, there's also just a ridiculous amount of misinformation that's being continually spread, and it's being allowed to be spread about me. And this is all happening while I can't engage with the discussion whatsoever. So all that's really done is prove what I knew all along, and that is that if I didn't actually actively defend myself, my work, my motivations for the work, the lies would take root. And they have. And we'll come to some of those in a moment. But mostly, and perhaps more importantly, and I'm sure a lot of you will actually echo this sentiment, I'm just tired about talking about the ban and having people talk about the ban, especially ill-informed people, and especially given the position I'm in where I can't engage directly with the discussion. As I've recently shown, the moderators of that subreddit have set rules where basically me talking about the ban equals an extension of the ban. So this video is being reviewed right now by a mod. Notes are being taken about what I'm saying. I've already said enough by criticising Reddit for there to be a bitch fest in some private forum somewhere. If people have said, why don't you show screenshots about these unreasonable requests? Well, of course, if I do that, ban extension. Why don't you show proof that the mods have moved the goalposts? Ban extension. If I tweet about any form of hypocrisy, ban extension. If I challenge anything being said about me, ban extension. So the best way to handle this gibberish at this point is to just no longer engage with it. So this will be the final words. It's not worth talking about anymore. I'm completely indifferent to it. It's been an exasperating, frustrating, but also a very enlightening experience. So let's just talk briefly about this misinformation that I want to specifically tackle. So people out there are saying that I apparently manipulated votes to get my content popular, to get my content on the front page, which of course never happened, ever. And I had a temp shadow ban once for linking to a Reddit thread from my Twitter. I had it overturned when I asked a Reddit admin to show me the rule where this wasn't okay. And they argued back and forth and said that while it wasn't technically against the rules, it was a potential issue. And I said the only rules they can enforce are the ones that technically exist, and they overturned my ban. It wasn't that I apologised or anything. I said this is fucking ridiculous, and you need to show me a rule or whatever. So they did overturn it at that time, and I never relented and sort of said, right, okay, this is the way that Reddit should be conducted. Brigading is now commonly just being used as an excuse to ban anyone. It's on the increase. You only have to go into some of the subreddits dedicated to this subject to realise this is now what people are told when they're banned or you were involved in a vote brigade. It's a very hard thing to sort of prove, especially if you're not involved in one, because then you have to think, well, what could it possibly be? So the only example of my brigading, which will probably be on your screen as I'm talking over this, is me calling someone an ass clown on Twitter with a link to their comment in Reddit, and apparently this is enough to have them downvoted. Not the fact they are an ass clown, and Reddit as a website enables people to show agreement or disagreement with the statement, even though that's supposedly not what upvotes and downvotes are for. It's actually me. It couldn't be the guy was wrong and he was downvoted independently. I am the master of puppets. And it's not surprising that the lie about me vote brigading my own content has been allowed to take root, given the mods themselves in their unprecedented subreddit ruling, the first I've ever seen, which is interesting given recently they said they didn't feel like shaming people was productive. Obviously shaming me certainly is. And violating my privacy in that way is, that's okay. But they use the word cheat. And of course the word cheat has an inherent implication that I somehow benefit from the actions directly, whereas in reality I'm yet to see anything beyond one admin comment to Total Biscuit over a year ago that even suggests I broke a rule, let alone that I've gamed a system. The constant doxing bullshit that gets brought up, I mean, there's some absolute waste of space. Who went to the trouble of compiling a post, which has been gilded twice, of course. Just got ridiculous lies in it, you know, like how I was contacting and stalking the mods on Facebook. I think the screenshot they used was from a admin in the StarCraft 2 subs, so it's not even related to this. And it was in relation to another story. I can't remember what it was. It's a long time ago. Like I said, this is 2014, February 2014. But apparently, because I made a point of saying I want to find out who these people are, because as we've established in previous outings, they were holding a disproportionate amount of power and not using it responsibly, and it was affecting my job and indeed the employment of up to a dozen other people in my previous role at Heaven Media. Apparently knowing these very easily obtainable names, which very often are out there because they put them on the internet. This makes me pure evil, obviously. And having the idea that people who hold power over people's jobs and therefore their lives shouldn't be able to hide behind a shield of anonymity, which again was just recently brought up again today, this makes me insane, apparently. Now, I find that incredibly weird, given that, you know, I've existed in society, I've held jobs outside of esports, and many of them. I've worked in managerial positions, I've held great responsibility. At no point was I ever able to deflect responsibility for my actions by hiding behind a nickname. It just wasn't viable. You can't do that in the real world. Now, that isn't to say I have a problem with anonymity as a concept when it's necessary. I absolutely champion it. But let's be clear, these people are not freedom fighters trying to overthrow an oppressive government. Their lives aren't in danger. So why is their anonymity sacrosanct? You know, I've often asked, and that is the question I indeed am asking. I think once a subreddit gets to a certain size, there needs to be either the machinery for accountability in there, or we need to be able to hold the people accountable as we would anyone else, as indeed I am being held accountable for my actions with my, you know, God-given name. You know who I am. Not that I believe in God. I don't want to trigger any atheists. But you know, that's who I am. There's no barrier. I don't even use a gamer handle anymore. There's also this idea that's been fostered that I lashed out unprovoked at anyone and everyone, when in fact there was always a group of people, as I'll demonstrate shortly, that would simply perpetuate the same lies about me in every thread. And I find it ironic that I am being portrayed as being this like hyper-aggressive, you know, foul individual, which, you know, I won't even deny. Some of the abuse that I gave out was it was always on parity with what I was getting. You know, but I do find it ironic that given that now Reddit's stance that the behaviour I was being subject to would be classified as harassment by their rules, and people that do this are at odds with the Reddit value of safe spaces, which again I find hilarious. So all I ever really wanted was if you're not going to ban those people, and I don't necessarily support the ban. I don't like this idea of safe spaces, but I then surely have to have the right to reply to them in kind, and that was never really afforded to me. I was told quite consistently and constantly by moderators that I had a responsibility actually to ignore them and not to feed the trolls because I'm the known quantity. Therefore, rules apply to me, but not to them. They can simply make another account and troll you, even if we ban them. So, why uphold a standard? Then finally, this lie that I told a suicidal person to kill themselves on Reddit, which of course never happened. And I'm not saying I've never said it to people down the years. I'm not saying I've never made jokes about it, even on some of the streaming shows that I've done. But here's what I can say. If someone was genuinely suicidal or saying they were genuinely suicidal, I'd definitely take the time to listen to them, and I've done this many times over. I did a show about mental health and esports with the CSGO caster Anders, and I was flooded with messages and requests for help after that show. I took the time to listen to everyone, sometimes even being on Skype, talking to people until the small hours. And look, I'll play a clip from that show now, and you can tell me if this sounds like somebody that isn't serious about the matter of suicide.
I agree, but more people than you would know, dude. I mean, this is like, I fucking hate it when I do this, but like in the interests of honesty, and this isn't isn't a Richard Lewis such a great guy thing. I mean, I've done it on several occasions. There's people out there, and for whatever reason, I don't get it, Anders. I don't get it. I go to events with you, and I see people coming up to you, and they want you to sign things, and they want photos with you, and you see my reaction when people want to do it with me. I don't get it. I'm like, are you sure? I almost try and talk them out of it. And that's just the small stuff. I've had people message me and be like, I listen to your shows all the time. I read your articles. I'm depressed and I don't know who else to talk to. And I get overwhelmed by this like sense of responsibility. Like they're picking me they've got all these people in their lives that they could talk to, and they're choosing me. Yes. Right. So I need to fucking listen now. I won't do anything more important with my life in esports than this. That's how I look at it, Writing an article about, player X joins team Y, like, give a fuck. It's meaningless, like, doing a show like this, I mean, apart from this topic, it's a bit of light entertainment. It's meaningless. When somebody reaches out to you like that, you're not gonna do anything more important with your career, arguably your life, than help another human being that has chosen you specifically for that help. And, I always make a point, and it's happened on multiple occasions, I always make a point of being accessible. Whatever I'm doing has to stop, and that individual needs to be heard because of the importance of what they're asking you to do, and you specifically now.
So, taking all of this into consideration, I think this is a gross misrepresentation of what happened. I find it amusing that telling someone to grow up while they are still living with and are fixated on their parents' relationship doesn't invalidate all of this other stuff that I've done. There's need to have a serious topic about mental health and esports, and indeed the work I've done directly with people. But every day I got to read that shit. I got to read that lie. The mods even made a point of tweeting about it in the public domain, replying to a Sky Williams post. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Sky Williams, he has quite a lot of followers, quite a popular chap. And I'm sure they, weren't just doing it because there's a possibility that gets, retweeted, or indeed if people are following the discussion, of which there may have been numerous ones, that this would get out there into the public domain, and indeed it has. Now, today I had the surprise pleasure of a moderator in the new League of Meta subreddit correcting this lie. And it could, of course, this post, I don't know what's prevented this post being made prior to now. It seems that it was left as long as possible. And then it's been posted on a new subreddit with just over 1,000 followers at the time of recording this. So as few people can see this much needed correction as possible. So I imagine the lie will perpetuate in that echo chamber of bullshit. It will be a permanent smear and a permanent lie about me in the public domain that I will never be able to correct. Now, the other thing in all of this, when I'm reading comments about my ban and why it's an absolute necessity, the central argument seems to be that because I say things people don't like, I don't deserve to have a job. And this sounds incredibly familiar. It sounds a lot like what happened to Thorin when the Reddit mob was instrumental in getting him fired from On Gamers, or the hysteria surrounding his always misquoted comments about Reginald, which have seen him being branded a racist by some people, by a few people actually, quite a few. And all of those threads that still pertain to that, which are all clearly witch hunting by the mod's own definitions, and all have had very real consequences as evidenced by his career and the path that it took. They were all allowed to remain, and they still do so. Indeed, if Duncan was ever to leave esports employment and someone were to Google his name, I dread to think what they would dredge up in terms of the falsehoods that have been perpetuated about him. But of course, when it's somebody that's unpopular, when it's somebody that the mob doesn't like, witch hunting's actually okay. And in fact, we're seeing Reddit increasingly being used in this capacity. It also reminds me of what happened with William Turton. This is a young journalist who made one errant misquote when he was at On Gamers. That dogged him through his entire esports career. It was continually brought up, whether it was relevant to the story he was reporting or not. And when he wrote a story about MYM, that most trustworthy of organisations, this bastion of class and integrity, the resulting behaviour from the community, and indeed the mods themselves, made him quit his job. He just quit. He'd had enough. He snapped. And I don't blame him. He's a lot younger and perhaps doesn't have as broad shoulders as some of the older guys. But it's not even that. I mean, he's doing really well for himself. He's been, profiled now in 2 mainstream media magazines as a young star. And I'm glad that my faith in him was well placed. Because he's going to go and do big things in his life, probably things that will eclipse my own due to my own very poor career choices. So, I think we can see immediately there's a problem with having a community that revolves around the idea, as indeed the whole of League of Legends does, that there has to be some form of social justice. Think about the tribunal. That assholes, even competent ones, need to be punished by any means necessary. And it's a concept actually that's infecting everything. The mob mentality is just starting to rule over every aspect of our lives. The rules they enforce are rarely consistent. There's double standards everywhere. For example, right now, I am being perpetually harassed for being found guilty of harassment. So it's okay when other people do it because they have, by their own declaration, no standing in the community, therefore they can enforce the standard yet never have to live up to it. And I've seen numerous posts actually to this effect. People say, hey, I'm just a troll on the internet, why do I care about my actions? As if the adopting of the mantle of troll or the adopting of the mantle of nobody important, somehow excludes you from any consequences, any rational thought about the way you're behaving. So at this juncture, I'm just like, do you know what? Fuck it. There's this notion that League of Legends is the whole of esports, and it's hilarious to me because I was here before League of Legends existed. What I don't need is just the fucking headache of having to deal with the one esports title where literally everything about it is corrupt from the top down, and it's just simply not worth the stress. So there's this other argument that's made that, my banning's good, and in fact we should try and drive him out of the scene because then people will be forced to replace Richard Lewis, and they'll behave differently. They'll behave in a way we like, but they'll be Richard Lewis, but just in a way that we like. So we'll have Richard Lewis, but we'll like them. So you have that idea that that's possible for starters, as if somehow the balance of personality and the end product aren't somehow inextricably linked, that you perhaps need a certain type of personality to even be able to put yourself through this, to even get to the point where you can investigate a story and have an organisation that has a far greater presence than you ever will call you a liar, and deal with all of the mob abuse and the bullshit that comes out of that. But apparently, this can happen, and I'm waiting for it. And that's fine, actually. In fact, you can ask any of the young journalists that I've brought through, and I think I've done more in this regard than any other journalist in the industry in terms of bringing young people through. You can ask your Josh Ravens, your Jacob Wolves, your Joe Plugwadiches, you name, I always fuck up. You can talk about all the other guys that I helped get jobs. You can talk about young female journalists that I've worked with and tried to help because I feel they're underrepresented. They look at what I do and they all say the same thing. They say, why the fuck would you do that to yourself? Why would you put yourself through that? They're not ready for the shit that comes with it. And in fact, the William Turton experiment simply proves it. That if you have anything to say about it, you'll just drive anyone out that you don't like. They have to be willing to fight you every inch of the way, and then you just criticise them for fighting you every inch of the way. That's the insanity. That's the ridiculousness of writing in particular about this community. Now, there is no benefit ultimately in spending all that energy just to be on top of every league story, which I've tried to do, again, for the betterment of the community, for the fans who want to know things, for the players who need to have their rights represented and need to have all these little shady secrets just put out there into the public domain. Like, whatever it is, there's never any reward in it for the writer, and there never was, actually. So I'm more than happy at this juncture to just say, you know what, like, fuck it, fuck League of Legends. It just is a waste of time, and I've never cared about a game's popularity. That's never been what's driven me to do my work. When people were offering me money to write about 1.6, I stayed writing about Counter-Strike Source for free. I left CSGO just as it was getting big, after doing loads of work, and that included distributing beta keys, beta server testing, putting out content such as the very first looks of maps, which we did. We had a world exclusive on that, just because the hate and abuse was just insane at that time. One thread, actually, that sticks in my mind was some guy posting on hltv.org forums, and he said he had proof that I was a paedophile and would be posting it within the hour. And needless to say, that thread was allowed to stay up for that time, despite moderators being very aware of its, the admins, I should say, of HLTV being very aware of its existence. Now, at that time as well, when the 1.6 CSS battle was still raging, when that was still relevant, death threats were fairly common, but that's nothing new. Had those for 10 years. But let me tell you some anecdotes that are relevant about being a CS writer. My mother once got diagnosed with an illness that she subsequently recovered from, and during a casted game, some players that had a grudge about me over something to do with one of my friends got the captaincy for Ireland in a Home Nations Cup, and they said he was too English to, this is the level we're talking about. Well, anyway, in their game, they tagged up as things like, Gonzo, which is my gaming name at the time. Gonzo's mother is dying, and Yamara is dying of cancer, you cunt, and things like this. So that was a nice touch. And then pretty much every event I went to, I'd be subject to people like just threatening me, like just coming up when they'd had a few beers. But I don't scare easy. And not much ever really came of that. I'd always be like, okay, let's go outside, and then it would generally fizzle out. One time a group of players did get recorded on their TeamSpeak or Mumble or whatever it was, talking about how they were planning to stab me at the next I-Series, which is the UK event. And their plans were pretty specific in nature, and the recording got sent to a few people. And the reason behind this, the person who was very enthusiastic about the prospect of stabbing me, the guy who was actually saying, I will definitely do this. It had been written about in one paragraph of a LAN event diary, and I said his team hadn't done particularly well, and they weren't getting along. They weren't even a top team. They were a very mid-tier team at best in the UK. And even recently, during the investigation into the match-fixing allegations, I endured just 6 months of abuse, being called a liar, being smeared by the players' fucking allies. My email was repeatedly subject to hacking attempts, one of which was successful. There were threats, Skype was hacked, people trying to hack my Twitter. It was just ridiculous. Now, I could give you dozens of stories like this, but here's the part where I tell you that despite all of that shit, as extreme as that sounds, covering League of Legends is hands down the worst part of my career to date. The constant slog to simply put content out, the sheer volume of abuse, and much worse actually, just far eclipses anything I ever put up with in CS. And I want to demonstrate that now just briefly. Do you remember my first opinion piece that really took off? It was called Chaos, Retirement, Propaganda and the Illusion of Choice. Let's review the reaction to that, and here's some choice selections. This was pretty much how I was revealed to the League of Legends community. This is the article that got me known, got me established, if you will. It was, like I say, just an opinion piece, and everything in that opinion piece has proven to come to pass. It was fairly astute and surprisingly well informed, considering I hadn't been writing about the game for very long. But you can see from these reactions I'm bringing up here that this was the shit I was sort of having thrown in my face. But I thought, new community, perhaps, well, not even perhaps, people weren't writing opinion pieces at this particular juncture. So perhaps they just hadn't been subjected to opinion pieces. So what I did, I created a thread basically saying, hi, I'm the guy who wrote it. This is what an opinion piece is. This is what it said. This is what I meant. This is why I do it. And it was ultimately to try and educate the community as to what an opinion piece, just is, that it is a valid form of journalism. So I'll show you some choice cuts from the thread. But just to start off, you can see that even when D-Man came out and said what he did here, it wasn't enough to make people realise that what I was doing was just part and parcel of any healthy esports scene. So again, just abuse constantly for trying to clarify my position, and this thread actually got me a lot of hate on Twitter too. It got me a lot of personal messages. If anything, this thread actually did worse for me than if I'd just left it alone. So I tried to do something positive here and engage with the community, and you can see what I got for that. So then you think, okay, well, they're opinion pieces, and opinions are by nature divisive, and indeed I've said this many times over. For an opinion piece to be truly successful, it has to be borderline. You couldn't write a successful op-ed about why Richard Lewis thinks murder should be illegal, because I think we all think murder should be illegal. So it would be, okay, welcome to civilized society, and that would be the end of that one. So again, what would be the point of writing that? But I thought, okay, well, opinion pieces are what they are. I can start now probably doing some a bit of investigative reporting, try and do some news, try and do some leaks. And you think, well, they couldn't possibly be mad at you for leaking news and roster changes. Everyone else loves that, right? Every other scene loves that. So how could people be mad? So then we look at the Frog and Super Team story, which was all confirmed by him as being accurate at the time of reporting. And again, it was just a shit show, just abuse, hate. I'm a liar, I'm a fraud, I'm doing this for clicks, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking to myself, don't people realise that actually I've got a reputation here to maintain? I haven't been doing this for a week. It's not my first rodeo. I need to be accurate. I need to get these stories right. And again, nobody else was really covering these sorts of leaks. People were too afraid because of this very reaction. Now, this is typical for every story I put out, every opinion piece, every leak. And no matter how many times I was right, which was, I think even my biggest detractors would admit, was a pretty high batting average. I always started out as wrong in the eyes of people who really should know better. But it doesn't just stop there. You know, if people were just typing, "This won't happen," about a potential leak or an upcoming roster change, I'd probably handle it all right, actually. But if you look at the comments, and these are all standard for a day's work, these are just some that I've picked out, and you tell me if these are reasonable and not worth responding to, if this is a balanced and pleasant way to engage with someone just trying to do their job. And again, like I say, these are from a range of time, range of things. These are just ones that I kept, I think, because they were particularly amusing, or just to demonstrate to people, really, this is a day in the life. This is what you do. This is actually a bigger part of the job than the job. Sort of being this just lightning rod for this sort of bullshit. Now, I want you to think about what it's like to do a job and know every time you actually do it, your whole day, and I mean day, at minimum, is ruined. People say, just leave the computer, ignore it, but you actually can't because the piece of work could get removed. So you need to challenge that, and indeed it was getting removed more often than not by the moderators who had, for some reason, got it into their heads that I was some sort of poisonous element, that I needed to be policed, that it was very important that the user base of the subreddit were protected from my work, that I needed to be aware of their editorial standards. I find it amusing that now they dismiss that entire period, which lasted about a year, of them just saying mistakes were made. We now have a better understanding of how to interact with journalists. Well, it didn't help me out at all. It didn't benefit me whatsoever. I'm glad people now benefit from that. But it certainly doesn't make up for any of the stress or the bullshit I had to put up with. On top of that, a maelstrom of pitchforks can just be whipped up at any time, so you need to be around to cut that off, to head that off. Sometimes, and this happens more often than you'd probably care to think, people can contact your bosses, so you need to be at a PC, so if the phone call comes through and they want you to change something, you can do it. So you just sit there, miserable, wondering exactly what it is you can do to try and reach out to these people and make them realise that what you're doing is actually journalism and actually has a part to play in the wider scene. And actually, if we're being honest, for the most part, it's for them. It's for the same people that are just calling you scum. So yeah, at that point, and it had been happening for a while, I gave the fuck up in just trying to treat the homogenous mass called a community, which apparently I'm not a part of anyway, because every time the community has a discussion, it's about what we should do with Richard Lewis, like I'm an outlier to it. And again, I'll probably show you just some of the threads that have come up just in the last mod-free week. And again, it's been polarising, but you know how it is. The haters, the people with negative things to say, will always go greater lengths than your supporters. That's the nature of fanaticism, unfortunately. Certainly it is in my experience. And actually, just to qualify that statement, because it's the kind of little throwaway line that people like to challenge in these videos, what I mean by that is that very often people who are fanatical followers of something, they don't define themselves by their devotion to that cause. They actually define themselves by hatred of the cause to which they are opposed. So think, again, Gamergate. The radical social justice warriors that have subverted the message of what Gamergate is about, where the moderate Gamergate is like, it's just about ethics and journalism, to the point where that has become a meme and a laughable phrase. And then, of course, you've got the Gamergaters who are out there harassing women and trying to drive them out because they see them as a threat. The extremists on both sides have gone to the greater lengths to almost define what the debate is about, when really it's about these things. That's the nature of fanaticism. So, I just want you to, again, because there's been a real lack of sort of empathetic response to all of this. Just to ask you a question, what would you do if every day you're at work, and I don't know what you watching the video do, but put yourself in that position. You're at work, a bunch of strangers come to where you work, and they just shit all over you and what you're doing, and just criticising you, and every day they're accusing you of lying, or if it's more relevant, stealing. They say your skills and experience aren't real, you need to be fired. They go after that. They claim that you're being paid money in exchange for a pay structure you've never been part of, clickbait or whatever's relevant to your job. And they're trying to take the roof over your head away, the food out of your mouth, the money you use to support family. They're trying to take that away from you because they feel that they can. They feel entitled to do so. So would you be angry? Would you call these people morons? Or even worse? I think you might, but there's this myth that in League of Legends everybody's an angel. Apparently, everybody has these unshakable morals. Now, the other thing that got said a lot was, why can't it just be about the work? Why is it always got to be about Richard Lewis? And the people who say that are the same people that just fucking talk about me, the person, always, endlessly, it seems. In fact, the debates that are even happening now still revolve around Richard Lewis is toxic, as if the word toxic has any relevance outside of League of Legends, that indeed the esports ecosystem and employment law in general is an extension of the fucking tribunal. It's never been about the work, has it? Indeed, the objection to my work has always been, he's got an opinion, how dare he? He's leaking news we don't want to believe, how dare he? What a cunt, he's a liar, he's a cheat. These are value statements about me as a person. This isn't your work lacks merit on these grounds. And that's the hilarious thing. You engage with those people and you're in the wrong. So, now I shouldn't ever have to talk about my personal life, really. I do try and be transparent because I demand transparency from other people. I don't try and hide anything. I think the people who support my work, I do think of them very dearly. There's a reason why I follow so many of them on Twitter. There's a reason why we interact regularly on our streams, because I value what they've given to me. Now, if you're one of those people, you'll probably already know this. You'll have followed things that have gone on in my life, because I do talk about them. I talked about this, and I think a few people mentioned it. I think I brought it up on an episode of First Blood. But anyway, I'm not particularly comfortable having to say this, but it seems that within the context of things that are being said, I need to put this out there. I wish I didn't, but it feels that it's becoming necessary at this point. So a little under a year ago, my best friend, who I lived with throughout university, his mother died in a house fire, and he was accused of starting it, and it was a real mess. Now this guy, he was a rock for me during university. In fact, I should clarify, he definitely didn't. There wasn't no evidence in the forensics to suggest that he did. Just in case anyone does try to dox me and find out who I'm talking about. Anyway, so this guy, he was a rock for me during university, he was like a little bit older, a little bit wiser. We were both poor kids. We both had to do a few illegal things on the side just to pay our way through university. And if anyone ever wonders why I'm sensitive about the whole "you're not even a real journalist" to me, I had to do a lot of shit just to even get to this fucking stage. And the one guy who sort of kept me sane and balanced, and in some instances alive, during that time is the guy I'm talking about now. Now, like a lot of friends, we drifted over the years. My career was starting to take off, and he'd struggled with drug and mental health problems, and I'm trying to put that life behind me, So he'd fallen on some tough times, and he'd ended up living back at home, and the fire happened and his mother died. So he called me up, and he told me the news. And it was surreal. I'd lived in that house where it happened. I'd slept in that room where the fire began. And he asked if I could get down to catch up, help him with stuff. So I said I would. But I had an esports gig to do, and it was Gfinity in London. And I said, after that, I'll fucking get down. I'll help you out with everything. And that's just who I am. I've sacrificed quite a bit really to focus on esports. It's not just like I said, it's not just a money thing. I do genuinely care about the industry and put a lot of time into it, to the point where it's hard to tell anymore if it's just a bad habit or not. But I did the event, and it was a real fucking long one. There were lots of delays and issues. And afterwards, we went out drinking in a casino, and it was 6 a.m. And I walked back to the hotel with Sir Scoots just as the sun was coming up. And got into bed, and shortly after shutting my eyes, I got a phone call from one of our mutual friends, and I'd been told that my friend had hung himself. And the guilt of that has, really fucked me up this past year, and it's not going anywhere. It's because there's nothing you can say about it. Now, I should have been there for my friend. It was a bad choice, and I've been so absorbed in this whole esports thing that I didn't want to say. Something came up to Gfinity. I was worried about how it would look. I'm trying to be professional, and there wasn't any indication, but maybe I should have known. And I 100% know that if I'd taken the time out to see him that weekend, he's still alive today. And you just live with that. You just get by. Now, after that happened, I'd also agreed to do the ESL1 Cologne Major. I think it was the following weekend or whenever it was. And, I didn't want to be unprofessional again. So I went to do that event. And I sat there like an idiot. I was wearing the jacket I wore to his funeral. And it was a rough weekend. I'd been labelled as an analyst, so you should know what that means by now. It's constant shit. If you put that label on anyone who isn't a top player, you're in for a bad time. So it was just a shit fest on forums, on Twitter, on Reddit. Numerous personal messages saying to kill myself before I ever do another major, and thanking me for ruining the event. And it was rough. We made it to the end. I dodged the after party, sat in the hotel. So you have to understand why it's especially ridiculous to have to live with the lie that I taunted a suicidal person into killing themselves. A 5-comment throwaway, no less. Why that lie would be particularly, offensive or whatever. And that isn't to say, again, that I haven't said it and I haven't made jokes about it, or I haven't repeated jokes about it. But that was out there, and of course, after it was made public, that was what I'd definitely done it. There was, no, there was no other version. Other subs from Reddit got mysteriously involved. So between Reddit and Twitter at that time, when it all happened, I was getting a death threat about every 5 minutes, like solidly. And then someone sent me the details of where I live, just the area, just enough to, make me think. It was probably pulled from a Skype locator. But I erred on the side of caution. I live with my girlfriend. I took my girlfriend out of the house and we went to stay at a country cottage in Cornwall for the weekend, just to get away from it, just to be safe. And at that point, I deleted my Reddit account, because it had become no more than a point of access to people who wanted to abuse me through that medium. So on my return, my inbox was just flooded with notifications of people trying to, access to PayPal, Facebook, email, Skype. Every time we did a show, or I'd try and stream it, it'd get DDoSed. Every piece of work I put out was subject to downvote brigades. Had to be made it to Reddit at all. And even though the admins acknowledged that this was happening, it was never really taken into consideration as to why I might be, a little fucking hostile towards people. Just keep in mind all of this, and then laugh when I tell you that I'm accused of harassment for flaming a few people in some comments, and always people that had stepped up to the plate first. So, all told, I think the stress of doing this shit just isn't worth it. It doesn't happen like this in other communities, really. The volume of abuse is far less. And of course you've got the benefit that the people who make the games in other communities aren't really leveraging other people to make your life difficult and to apply pressure to you and to smear you and drag your name through the mud. Which, I'm sure we can say you've done a good job of doing that partially yourself. But ultimately, I think you can see this has been just a ridiculous ordeal, and it shouldn't be. I'm just trying to write articles at the end of the day. I'm just trying to create content. So that's where I stand on the whole thing, really. I do feel aggrieved, but equally I don't really regret anything. It's not like I would go back and be like, oh, I should fall in line and not flame people that are shitting all over me and are saying lies about me and stuff. That standpoint doesn't make sense, and it never has, and it never will. You've got a right to defend yourself, and you've got a right to fight fire with fire, I believe. But getting back to the ban, just to conclude the video, the ban will, likely remain in place for a long, long time. And I'm at this point, I don't care. I can't care. I'm gonna get back to doing what I do, and what I've always done is I've always been good at digging up stories that interest me, digging up stories that are in the public interest, and quirky stories, funny stories, and expressing opinions about esports, which I've worked in for over a decade, and have given the best part of my life towards trying to help further, even to the detriment of many other things. So I'm just going to continue doing that, and if it happens to have overlap with League of Legends, then so be it. But there's just no point in trying to put up with this anymore. It's gone past the point of comedy. So I'm sure the lies will continue. I'm sure the spin will continue. I'm sure the ban will remain, and that's fine. That's everyone's prerogative, it seems. So I know this video is a bit of a departure and a bit of a ramble. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one with a different topic.